Welcome to Rillier Expeditions. I'm your guide, Tam of Rillier, and I welcome you aboard our ship. Just before we disembarked, I just want to send out a few huge shout outs. So, firstly, a huge shout out to those of you who joined me at my Ravenloft table for AlphaCon last weekend. I absolutely adored having you there and getting to test out some new pre generated characters that I was working with. I also want to thank everyone who came and checked out my table and saw my little diorama for my little graveyard that was waiting to be populated full of zombies. I also want to thank all of my fellow GMs who decided to take a similar approach to myself and bring joy to my black little tentacled heart in terms of they ran horror games of all sorts of descriptions and flavors. All of them were fantastic, and I was so delighted to see horror so well represented in the role playing part of the convention. In addition, I would love to send a huge thank you and a welcome aboard to our new subscribers on the channel. We had a number of you join off the back of AlphaCon, and I absolutely love having you aboard. I also have been reading all of your comments with interest, and I am looking forward to covering some of your questions in a future episode on this channel. So let's kick off, shall we? So let's define what I mean by a forgotten domain. So there are two definitions on this, but let me take you on a bit of a visual journey first. So when you think about forgotten, you do think of something that is forgotten to the mist, that it's not written about, that people don't talk about it anymore. And you kind of wonder why. Is there just something controversial or ugly or something that means that this domain just isn't talked about in the same breath as the likes of Barovia? Well, the truth of the answer is yes and no. Some of it is quite simply that in between publications, there are just so many domains to talk about. Each one of them has their own Dark Lord, each one of them has their own flavor. There is so many supplements and box sets and stuff for Ravenloft that going back, we're talking going back decades, that it would be an impossible Herculean task for the creators to include every single domain in fully fleshed out glory. So as a result, we do get a lot of domains that are listed as being in the category of other domains. Now, I was fortunate enough to get a pre-order copy of the digital version of the Horrors Within for Ravenloft. I absolutely intrigued by the book, I will say. I will do a separate video on my thoughts on it. But one of the things that I found was it tried so hard to cover so many domains. I think in the other domain section, there's like 33 domains. Unfortunately, when you're trying to cover that many domains, you are going to relegate them to little more than a paragraph. And unfortunately for me, a number of my favorites did end up in that section. But admittedly, some of them also ended up in the same boat with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which was published for 5e. So let's talk about Souragne. Souragne is absolutely one of these domains that I think needs a little bit more love and attention. It first appeared in the module called Night of the Walking Dead, and it was published in second edition Ravenloft, and heavily in second edition Ravenloft as one of their Islands of Terror. It is something that I think we need to change. We need to change the narrative a little bit for Paul Souragne. This is a lovely starting point to our visit to the Mists and to your visit to the Mists. So I think that Night of the Walking Dead is a fantastic module. It was written with a really clear beginning, middle, and end. It had a element to it that was part of an overarching story, and it was really written as the first Ravenloft adventure outside of the Strahd-centric Ravenloft and House on Griffin Hill modules. It does heavily lean into atmosphere and a building sense of dread that I think that will be a great introduction if you haven't already done a Ravenloft adventure or a Ravenloft campaign. I also do say with this as well is that the inspiration for this one is everywhere. So don't be afraid to give this one a go. So let's start with some heroic inspiration. So the thing that I will say with this one, um, use the original source material. Trying to reconstruct this domain out of a singular paragraph is going to be very difficult, and rely heavily on your imagination. Not to say that GMs don't have imaginations, we absolutely do, and we've got fantastic concepts. But I love the idea that you can take something that's fully formed and just translate it, rather than trying to make this holus bolus out of whole cloth. The other thing that I will say with this particular module is that it is so tight. It has a very good start, middle, and end. It's got a nice twist in it. It's got multiple moments where characters can shine in heroic brilliance, and it still has that ominous Ravenloft. There is nothing. You can't trust everything. You can't trust every victory, and I love all of that for this. The second thing that I will say is that when I went to adapt this module, the original source material was very much in the white zombie, Haitian zombie type of vein. I am not comfortable with that as a concept for myself. Now, your mileage will vary. It depends on your players, it depends on your table, it depends on you as a GM. It depends on a lot of things. For me personally, because I bring my modules to conventions and I do have intergenerational players, there are certain topics that I just think are not quite appropriate for my table. So for that reason, I kind of did a little twist on this and I took a little bit of different inspiration. So I'll talk about that in a moment, my inspirations behind this. But one of the things I will say about Souragne is there is two enemies in there, not just the zombies, which are just a whole thing. The actual environment of Souragne is just as interesting as what the zombies and the Dark Lord are. So use your environment. I absolutely love a swamp setting. I have not many managed to find this in many different campaigns that I've run over the years, but I have found it in this one. So the idea of your player characters being in a tiny little boat going up a swamp that's full of crocodiles and who knows what else is absolutely amazing. Bring in, when you're thinking about your swamp element for this, think about things like Apocalypse Now or Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, same source, where they've got a small boat that is literally going up the middle of a river, that is so flanked by both sides, by who knows what. There could be anything in that swamp, there could be anything in that jungle, and absolutely play into that. Play into the fact that every splash of water, every log that's like drifting past them could be something. Build on that atmosphere. It absolutely sells this, especially the first section of it, and gives you such an atmosphere of element. And the thing about it is, the more visual you can bring this, absolutely bring this to it. What I would also suggest is if you can get some sound effects similar to Pocket Bard or something like that, use those. Have crickets and frogs chirping away in the background as you're running that section of this domain. It will absolutely paint such a beautiful picture for you. Secondly, and now we're going to go into our bardic inspiration. So, first thing I changed was I, again, wasn't comfortable with the word plantation or the idea of a plantation. I will say that I am too white for a plantation. So I took the inspiration of the Marsden House from Salem's Lot. You could also use the idea of the Bates Motel, the house on the hill. You can also use even the Amityville Horror, like even the house. All of these houses are really distinctive in that the house itself is a character, not just the area that it's in. I love the idea that you read the descriptions of King and talking about the Marsden House in Salem's Lot, and this house is looming over the town. It's actually almost like it's got a physical evil presence about it. Absolutely do that for the Tarascon Manor. Absolutely do that. Bring it to life. Bring it as its own thing so that it almost keeps your players going, is it the twins that are causing the problem? Or is it the house? Or is it the swamp? What is it that's causing this issue? The second thing is I did keep the twins. There is in the module, there's two twins. Both the Tarascon sons are both twins. I like that element. I like the fact that you've got one brother trying to help the other and the consequences of that help. Absolutely. I kept those elements in. In the later editions, it just removes references to them altogether. And I think it's simply because they just wanted to try and keep a singular Dark Lord or a singular focus for the Dark Lord. I absolutely love the fact that this has got two potential candidates for the Dark Lord, and they're actually both just deliciously evil in their own right, but also deliciously tragic. The other thing that I used as my bardic inspiration was the idea of prophecy as being something, if you try to lean into or avoid, is actually quite devastating. So for this particular element, I brought in the idea of the Oracle of Delphi. So for those of you who know your mythology, the Oracle of Delphi is one of these things where every time a hero goes and gets a prophecy, or the parents of the hero go and get a prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi, what tends to happen is they get a prophecy, absolutely. But for some reason, because it's so vague and so easily to be misunderstood or misconstrued, you get some absolute bangers where, someone goes, oh yeah, I put my son up on a hill and we absolutely avoided that prophecy and that's never going to hurt us. And then, they happen to come across you on the road and, an altercation happens and then, oh no, you married your mum. It's just that sort of delicious irony. I love the idea that the prophecy that the Vistani give the Tarascon brothers is absolutely like you'll do this thing and it will bring you all this greatness, and it absolutely is both the source of their power and their ruin, and I absolutely love it. So that's my definitely my ancient inspiration for this, is to look at the idea of prophecy as this double-edged sword. But obviously, the modern interpretation of this is Romero. This is absolutely 100% zombie siege Romero. There is no doubt in my mind that when Bill was writing this particular one, that he was like, oh, it's going to be zombies. Let's get some Romero. Let's get all Romero up in this place. Even the name invokes Romero. So absolutely would go for the idea of Night of the Living Dead. I would go for also Dawn of the Dead, which is one of my favorite zombie films of all time. So anything that's like a siege, absolutely use. That's your point of inspiration. I would also love to see someone do this with a more modern take on zombies. So, taking Snyder's Dawn of the Dead and actually making the zombies move quick. That absolutely would be so completely terrifying. So, absolutely bring bring all your zombie goodness to this. There are so many great films and novels and even comic book series. So I'm thinking of The Walking Dead here when I speak of this, that would absolutely lend themselves to how you interpret Souragne as a domain, but also how you play your zombies. Play your zombies smart. Don't just, as much as they are the Walking Dead, they do, you can absolutely give them as much or as little personality as you want. I have to admit that personally, I did have to refrain from using the line "send more adventurers." Those who know. But this is absolutely a chance for you to get all your zombie horror fantasies out of the way. Absolutely. What I also did was, to give this a slightly modern twist, I did actually bring in the zombie clot monster from the Ravenloft, the Horrors Within play along for Dungeon Masters, which I absolutely love that series. I love the concept of it. And it also, for me, it was a way of moving from having just hordes upon hordes of zombies to having a singular threat, but just as bad as having hordes upon hordes of zombies. So you can absolutely bring those elements in, bring something different in just to update your module if you wanted to. I'm certainly not averse to people going, hey, I do really like this, but I really like this. What I will say, doing conversion on this was really simple. The basic plot pretty much stayed the same. I just had to change certain elements just to make it a little bit more updated. And obviously, if you were even going for 5 or 5.5e, you will need to update the zombies and the statistics for the creatures that the players encounter. That's fairly easy. There's not a lot in there that I found you had massive conversions for. I think there was only one type of zombie that wasn't covered in any of the updated material, but a quick Google search found me references to it. It's absolutely fine. There's also a lot of material that people have written in relation to updating, how you update from second and even third and 3.5 to 5 and 5.5. So use your Google resources. There's heaps and heaps of them out there. And there has been a lot of people who have done a lot of work even updating all of the Dark Lords to 5th edition rules. So if you go through Drive Through RPG, you'll absolutely find it. There's a book there, I think it's called Who's Doomed. They absolutely have updated all of the Ravenloft domain Dark Lords to 5th edition, which was fantastic when Van Richten's came out because there were no stats for any of the Dark Lords. So I hope that that's given you a little bit of an insight into Souragne and how you can bring this particular domain into your Ravenloft and your D&D games. I do absolutely enjoy converting modules from older editions to new editions, especially when they're so rich in the lore. And and I particularly enjoy converting Ravenloft simply because a lot of the inspiration for Ravenloft is based in literary sources or based in film, and I absolutely adore both. So any time that I can get a chance to talk about, hey, this is the inspirations I think have driven this domain, I like to see how close I get to the actual inspirations. But on that note, I'm actually going to get gesture for all of us to re-embark on the ship and for us to set sail. But until our next trip to the South Pacific, I want to thank you all again for joining me on this voyage on Voyage and Rayleigh expeditions. I will learn to talk. That would be awesome. And I want to thank you all again for liking and subscribing and commenting on the videos. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.